Open your ears and lube up your butthole. It's time for the What Do We Call It podcast. Now, here's your host. It's Jmann. Welcome to the What Do We Call It podcast. I'm Jmann.
And I'm number one fan, Tim.
I would like to remind you of today being an important day in history. August 28th, 1963. MLK's I Have a Dream speech.
Ah, yes, yes.
And the reason I bring that up is Martin Luther King pressed for peaceful protest, intelligent change, not shoehorning your ideas down people's throats with riots and violence and force.
Yes.
As opposed to Malcolm X, who had the mindset of by any means necessary, but eventually softened and said, yeah, when I was younger, perhaps I didn't have the straightest mindset on how to bring about the changes I want. Why I feel this is important is after the Charlottesville riots, the alt-right showed up. Apparently the Nazis showed up. Apparently the crowd outside of Castle Frankenstein showed up with their tiki torches.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And then the Antifa pussies showed up with their fucking ski masks and bandana masks and their weapons, and all hell broke loose.
It did, yeah.
So this is where it gets a little muddier. The alt-right are standing up basically for white rights. Very few of them are saying, like white power. There's very few of those people that are crying white power. The alt-right, kind of in a roundabout way, is a very masked or shrouded version of the white power movement, whether they want to admit it or not. But those people, despicable as their views may be, showed up, got their permit, were hanging out, doing some chanting, marching on the streets.
I haven't seen too much about it before Antifa showed up, but were they relatively peaceful? Were they just there showing off their signs and whatnot?
I mean, they were being assholes, but they weren't being violent assholes. And when Antifa showed up, that's when the rioting and the fighting and the violence really broke out. And I'm not blaming Antifa for causing the violence by saying that. But when they showed up, they didn't show up to shout back. They showed up armed with, bats and all kinds of shit and tear gas.
Well, then I'd hate to break it to everybody, but they showed up with the intention of being violent.
Well, whether or not they went there, quote, prepared to, quote, defend themselves if need be, their movement does have kind of a reputation for showing up and causing chaos and wreaking havoc and starting fights.
Well, that's because that's all that little small-minded people know how to do.
Well, the more important point there is what if they show up and they're not all in masks, and they don't all have weapons, and they just show up with signs and torches of their own? Does the same fighting break out? You, trigger the fight or flight in the minds of all these amped up white supremacists or alt-right people there. You show up with weapons, the other people that don't have weapons are going to think, uh-oh, I need to be on the defensive.
Yeah, if you show up and you're flashing weapons, it's going to make put everybody else on edge.
Because, when the cops show up, if you're standing there with a gun, waving it around, I don't think they're going to be under the impression you're there just to speak your mind, as much as possibly speak your mind and take a few people with you.
No, they're going to go on a defensive, which we've seen time and time again. They're going to draw their weapons, and they're going to fight.
So what I'm hammering at here is, why is it that we can't have peaceful protests? Despite the fact that you might disagree, strongly disagree, or flat out fucking hate the message of somebody else, why does it have to devolve into us versus them thinking? And some people are throwing free speech out there. And I, for one, my first reaction to this was, it's an attack on free speech. Now, you're free to shout whatever idiotic, hateful shit you want.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But be prepared for consequences if it's not the mindset du jour, or if it's so taboo that it's borderline discriminatory or hateful. Get ready to have people snap back at you. But they should do it in a productive means that doesn't include running people over with cars, beating people over the head with baseball bats, punching a broad, whether she has stinky, stupid dreadlocks and a bull ring in her nose or not. By the way, I'm fine with that Antifa girl getting punched in the face.
You lose.
I haven't even seen that one. What'd she do?
This is many, many months ago. She showed up to a protest, and beforehand she puts out some social media notifications saying, about to go to this protest, nervous as fuck, hoping to come back with 100 Nazi scalps.
Shut up, bitch.
So she was placating a mindset of willingness to engage in violence before she even got out the door. And then she gets there, and then she gets up in this dude's face, and it looks like she's charging at him with her hands up kind of defensively, but then he smacks her right in the fucking nose, and it looked beautiful.
Oh, you can.
And then she becomes this sudden face of the movement.
I did nothing wrong.
Oh, dude, she fucking gave interviews where she said there were more people coming at her than there were. She got hit more often than she did. She was fighting for her life. There were people with knives. It's such bullshit. And then she's not even using her real name. People outed her on the internet for who she really is. And she uses like 3 or 4 fucking aliases. Ended up finding naked pictures of her she put up on the internet under an alias. And she is not very shaven. I'll tell you that much.
Ew.
So anything she might have been trying to get across, once they figured out who she was and alerted everybody to these pictures, nobody cares what your politics are when you've got a hairy butthole and a bush and pit hair and leg hair. Yes, she's free to be as hairy as she wants. I'm not shaming her for being natural, but I think most guys want women that are, pretty and clean shaven and don't smell like old tube socks and cum rags like I imagine she does.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that statement.
So let me pose something. If there are protests, like for instance, say, I don't know, a black guy gets shot by Minneapolis PD. Hard to fathom, I know.
Oh, yeah, that's such a nice town.
So really suspend belief and try to embrace the whole hypothetical nature of a black guy getting shot by MPD.
I need to go to my imagination land.
So they occupied the 4th Precinct parking lot after Jamar Clark got shot.
Mm-hmm.
And it was mostly peaceful, but it got pretty loud. It made some people nervous. They wanted him out. They tried to force him out. The people fought back. And I'm using the word fought back as in like they stood up for themselves. They didn't back down. But the city ultimately, made them all get out of there.
There were shots fired too, weren't there?
Some shit did go down.
One of the protesters supposedly just shot randomly into the air. But they're not sure if he was a protester or if just somebody coming by there to rile things up.
Well, it went from what was intended to be a peaceful protest and an occupation to becoming all hell breaking loose. And then there was that case of the 4 white kids that went down there and were dumb enough to make a video before they got there showing off guns, saying they're going to shoot somebody. And some kid fired off bullets into the crowd, and now he's serving like a 20-year sentence for it.
Good. He deserves it.
Why is it that people can't come together for some sort of summit of differing ideals peacefully?
It'd be nice if people would do that, but nobody ever wants to admit, well, I don't even know if it's the right way to put it, but when it comes to doing your ideals, it seems nobody wants to give in on their ideas. Either my ideas are all right and yours are all wrong. That's how everybody looks at it. And compromising on that would basically, I guess, to them seem like they're completely in the wrong. No compromise. It has to be my way.
Yeah. I get it where it's a completely different battlefield because MLK was fighting for civil rights. For change, for equal rights for people of color.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew that if he picked up a bat, they'd label him a criminal. If he lashed out violently or called for riots or any of that shit, it would completely demolish any sort of momentum they had for their cause. It shit it all away. No one's going to be like, yeah, we really got to fucking change for these people.
He handled it tactfully, and he actually got some stuff done, didn't he?
Yeah, until he got shot.
But, I mean, what he was doing was working.
It was opening people's eyes, yes. And that's the unfortunate nature of the beast, is some people will argue, and I guess I agree with this mindset to an extent, that change doesn't happen on its own. Revolutions require force. How much force is allowable?
I mean, if you want to look at, like, the revolution this country had to get started. For the War of Independence, yeah. I mean, it came down to bloodshed and all that, but that's one thing. That was just fighting for freedom, fighting from oppression. Nowadays, it doesn't seem like that's what they're doing. They're just fighting and causing disruptions and rioting just so that people would hear them. Even though they get heard, but like you said, the message gets lost as soon as people start to. When I watch the videos from Charlottesville, like that asshole plowing the car into the Antifa, or anything that I've seen in any of the protests in the last 2-3 years, the message is no longer important to me. All I am is like, how are you doing anything constructive by destroying the cities that you live in? It's whatever message they had is just lost. It's like the guy that got shot recently. What's his name? I think it was his sister that went on TV and started saying, "Don't be burning down our cities. Don't be burning this shit here. Go out there to the suburbs, those white people's homes, and burn that shit down out there."
Burning down ain't gonna help nothing. Y'all burning down we need in our community. Take that to the suburbs. Burn that down.
That's intelligent.
Yeah. But when you watch the news report, they edited it so it looked like she said, "Don't be doing it at all." When really she was saying, "No, don't do it here. Go over there and do it there."
Fire! 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 Fire!
MLK, here's the funny thing. He achieved the beginning of a revolution without force. But it almost seems like you have to use force to get your point across. Nowadays, no one wants to listen. Because everyone's an expert and they got all their social media outlets. You don't even know what the fucking truth is because, like you said, the news will edit the shit out of something to make it more palatable.
Or to skew it to their point of view.
Yes.
Not even palatable. It's like, what do we want this message to be? What do we think this should be? How can we make ourselves look good?
Here's the thing. How are you going to fix anything if all you do is go down there looking to riot?
That's just it. Yeah, your message is lost as soon as you start being violent.
I don't know anybody really that's pro-Antifa. Now, my friend Brandon, a.k.a. Kid Crazy, formerly of MPW wrestling fame, he went to the Trump rally in Arizona with his mom.
Okay.
He's a Trump supporter. He went viral with a video he made that was pro-Trump during the campaign. He made a Donald Trump American Badass mashup. It was very well done. He went to film school. It did go viral. He does not have what I would call a very popular view on the president. But his mom also very pro-Trump.
Mm-hmm.
His mom was like super stoked. They were 20 feet from Trump. She was so happy she got to see him. Or seeing a president that close is a big deal. But as soon as they get outside, all these fuckers are outside protesting, calling them Nazis, calling them white supremacists, calling them assholes. They called his mom a cunt. All because she was there to support the president. They don't know what her ideals are. So there's no civil debate going on anywhere, it seems. It's all, nope, sorry, made up my mind. Yeah, we made up our mind too. And yeah, let's fight about it because it's gonna help things. That's gonna solve everything when we basically have another civil war. But this time it's not North versus South, but a nationwide left versus right war of ideals.
If you're in a debate with somebody and either you or the other person resorts to name calling, you have no argument. I mean, if the only way you think you can make things happen or to get your point of view across is start throwing insults, then your point, as far as I'm concerned, is invalid.
Well, Brandon was just gobsmacked at the fact that they're shouting at his mom's like 55 years old. She's this nice little lady. And they're walking out. Brandon's like 5'10", he weighs about 205. He's pretty ripped because he used to wrestle and he bodybuilds and he's got this monstrous beard. So they're walking and they're just shouting shit at him. And he's probably lucky they didn't peg him with rocks or garbage because that's what it's gotten to. Supporting our president right now, not a very popular thing to do in public.
Well, supporting anything that isn't in their view, and I hate to put it this way, but Democrats versus Republicans. The Democrats are out there to make, if you're a Republican, you're automatically a racist. You're automatically a Nazi, even though I would say probably less than 5% of the people who are Republicans could actually be said to be a Nazi in one way, shape, or form. But that's what they do. It's like everybody that supports Trump is a Nazi. They're all racist. They're all this. They're all that. Never mind the fact that Trump won an award from Jesse Jackson. I think it was Jesse Jackson. He got an award from Jesse Jackson for hiring and employing so many minorities. Way back in the early 2000s or late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's hard to say, but Trump's not a racist. But because he ran under a Republican name, he's automatically a racist. And that's why I said a lot of these people on the left who are, Antifa, or Black Lives Matter and all that, their message is invalid because the first thing they do is start shouting insults and labeling everybody that doesn't agree with them a hater, a bigot, a misogynist, or anything.
Well, Antifa's one thing. I've come to the realization that there's two camps of Black Lives Matter. The people that actually believe in the cause, that there needs to be more done to shed light on the imbalance in the number of black lives that are taken by police and the lack of true value on black lives. And then you got the ones that just want to fucking call everybody racist and shit on them and start stuff. But here's the funny thing. When you're talking about anybody associated with Trump or the right or Republicans is labeled a Nazi or a fascist or a racist, here's why I think MLK was able to succeed. And you led me to this one. I was wondering how I was going to wrap this up. What's the main difference there between then and now?
He was doing versus what they're doing now?
Yeah, the cause then versus the cause now.
The thing that sticks out to me the most is he wasn't out there name calling.
That's true, but what I'm getting at is there's not so much unsurety. It was clearly black people don't get a fair shake, and if you're against MLK and the civil rights movement, you're probably a racist. It stood to reason.
No, you're
the
right.
Cross burnings, the Klan meetings, the cops turning fucking hoses and dogs on crowds of colored people. I mean, you knew who the bad guys were because they were the people shouting nigger all the time.
Yeah, right.
We need to shut that nigger
The
up.
lines.
We need to shut that nigger down. And now the lines are so blurred, everybody still thinks they're right. Back then, everybody thought they were right, but clearly history has reflected upon who was wrong. And it's those that placed a higher value on white lives over colored lives. We are all American, whether you want to accept that or embrace the ideal of equality or not, we are.
We are a human race.
We are. They could say, what's your race on a census? No, that's your skin color. It's not your race. There's
Doesn't
one
have anything
race.
to
It's
do
a
with
fucking
what
human
you are.
race.
Yeah.
So back then it was easy to peacefully protest. You march down the street and you go in knowing you're probably going to get fucked up. So come whatever may. It takes a lot more bravery to walk in unarmed and know that everybody that you're going up against, the cops are, quote, doing their job. But many of them, because it was so white back then, firmly believe in the cause that they're defending. They say they're keeping the peace, but clearly many of them had to have had racist ideals. And then you had the white supremacists. You didn't have neo-Nazis back then like that. You just had your white supremacists. There weren't so many offshoots. There weren't so many different cliques involved, different groups. Now, Black Lives Matter is like two different groups in one cause. Antifa, I don't know what the fuck to make of them other than that it seems like a bunch of people that want to violently force change, which isn't helping them at all because your heart's in the right place, but your head is fucked sideways, thinking that's how you do it. They're fighting fascism with fascism.
Yeah, they're using the same techniques that the Nazis used way back when, and they absolutely despise Nazis.
And then you've got the alt-right, and I'm using that term because I don't even know what term. You're clumping so many different groups of people together, and they're just labeled as the bad guys. Now, I'm not Republican. I'm not liberal or conservative. It varies by what topic we're talking about, what the cause is. Is it abortion? Is it women's rights? Is it civil rights. Like, you go issue by issue for me. I'm just somewhere in the middle. So if I defend my whiteness, I'm a racist. There people are taking the easy way out by pointing fingers, and it's doing nothing to help either side. That's why the divide in our country is growing so rapidly and so violently. Like, I'm not going to go down. Like, if I go to the state fair, which we're planning to do, I got to worry about if there's protests. People were avoiding the main gate like 2 years ago, and last year a little bit again because of Black Lives Matter. We're down there. They were afraid some shit would start. They just don't want the hassle. And I'm fine with them picketing, protesting, representing their cause as long as it stays peaceful. Mm-hmm. But if you go down to the fair this year, heaven forbid you're standing in line next to 3 people that are wearing Trump t-shirts and a couple of Antifa fuckers come running out of nowhere and swinging bats, and I get clumped in with those assholes, and I got to worry about like having a TBI because I got my skull cracked just for standing next to the wrong dude.
Yeah.
But that's where I'm going to wrap this one, where in the 1960s, the lines that were drawn were very clear. So now nothing's getting solved, and it's probably not going to get solved, and we're headed towards disaster as a nation because we're eating ourselves alive with rage. So it's time for some of these people to take a page out of MLK's book. March down the street with your signs. Maybe don't do it on I-94. Find a sidewalk or a closed city street. Get your permits. Do it the right way. Do it respectfully. And maybe you'll bring some people around, because that's the only way that you can change people's minds is by productively challenging their ideals. A meeting of the minds.
Yeah, you attract more flies with honey. If you're going to be an asshole and block people's way to work or fuck up their neighborhood, you're not going to get them to see your point of view.
Interact with the show on Twitter at What Do We Call It? That's at What Do We Call It. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/group/What Do We Call It podcast show. For the What Do We Call It podcast, I'm Jmann.
I'm number 1 fan Tim.
And that's the end.